House Leader, third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The horrors of residential school era and the 60s scoop repeat themselves every day in this province, systematically, one apprehension at a time. A case currently before the courts has become a symbol for how the racist, paternalistic system functions and is seen as a litmus test of whether this government can live up to their promises to do better. A mother from the Huu-ay-aht First Nation has taken the province to the BC Supreme Court in an attempt to get more access to her baby, her first child, taken from her for no direct reason when the infant was 3 days old and still in hospital. The Supreme Court ruled that Ministry of Children and Families must provide the mother with daily access to her baby girl to breastfeed. But the ministry's lawyers were back in court yesterday trying to further limit this mother and infant's time together. Through you, Honourable Speaker, to the Minister of Child and Family Development, the Minister says her goal is to keep Indigenous children in their own homes and communities and out of care. Can the Minister please explain how this case reflects the Ministry's so-called commitment to keep First Nations families together and to protect the mother-child bond?
Minister of Children and Family Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The overrepresentation of Indigenous children in care is unacceptable, and it needs to change. For too long, there have been systemic-wide assumptions and practices that have failed Indigenous children and their families. And I thank the member for raising this and for meeting with me on numerous occasions. And I know the member is well aware that I can't speak to specifics of the case because of the Child, Family and Community Services Act. But, however, I think the safety and well-being of children in our province and reducing the number of Indigenous children in care are priorities that we both share. And we are working with our Indigenous partners in BC to change how we deliver services, to keep children and families together and to ensure that their cultures and traditions are still with them. Since last year, the number of Indigenous children in care has been reduced by 100 kids, and those kids are no longer in care. We've also increased the rate of Indigenous family representation, meaning fewer kids are coming into care. We're making progress, but I think that it's still too slow. There's so much more we can do, and this is why we need to redouble our efforts, and we need to seek ways to ensure that we are working with our Indigenous partners.
House Leader, third party on a supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. A briefing paper released yesterday by West Coast Leaf Legal Association highlights how the Ministry is failing to meet their legal obligations under Section 2 of the Child, Family and Community Services Act, which states, if with available support services, a family can provide a safe and nurturing environment for a child, support services should be provided. This government is neglecting the preventative, supportive section of the Act, and as a result is overusing the child apprehension section, especially in First Nations communities. Less than 8% of all Canadian children under 14 are Indigenous, but they comprise nearly 65% of all children in foster care in British Columbia.
Shame.
Through you, Honourable Speaker, to the Minister of Child and Family Development, what specific direction is the Minister prepared to give to her ministry staff right now that indicates her commitment to preserving families, in particular where the maternal bond and the right of an infant to breastfeed are at risk?
Minister of Children and Family Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too agree we need to work with Ottawa to ensure that there is funding in place for all Indigenous people in this province and that the kids will benefit from that. And again, that is why we need to redouble our efforts in working with our Indigenous partners. And sometimes individual cases can teach us how to do things better, and sometimes each case is unique. And as I said, I can't speak to those cases, but I know there are many people that are working together in this province to balance the need for keeping kids safe and keeping kids and their families together, and especially when it comes to newborns. The decision to remove a child is never taken lightly, and it is made to reduce a risk to a child. Whenever possible, We try to keep the family together.
Members, we shall hear the response. Thank you.
And we also try to place the child with extended family or people who know the child and can provide safety and security. And whenever there's more than one nation involved, we work to ensure both nations are involved in the decisions that are going to be particularly beneficial to the child. I also know these decisions and this work is difficult for social workers. And I've heard from many social workers who are frustrated with the system. And we need to ensure that there are supports and tools in place so that we can work to change the system with our Indigenous partners. And this means looking at policies and legislation that's in place. And this is difficult work, but we are committed to it. We are committed to making the changes that need to be made.
Thank you, Minister.